Hi, virtual students. We are here with Unit 2, Unit 3, Part 5, and going to finish up these notes that we started on our last part here down on the bottom half of this back page. All right, so that's where we're headed. We spent a lot of time here the last couple videos talking about how much the how these lines moving affects equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. We're going to talk today about some things that the government does and how that affects our supply and demand, and explaining how those in our case price controls and what happens when those price controls are implemented, and how we can explain. Okay, so first of all, come with the thing here. You're take a minute. You're coming up with an increase and decrease in demand and supply for both these two products. Okay, so go ahead and take a second. All right, first, increase in demand for football as well. We could just say that the Super Bowl is in Indianapolis, or we could say like the fall, the end of summer. Decrease in demand. We had a bunch of um, concussion stuff in the news and the dangers of football and stuff like that. So maybe people stop buying them. The supply side always is going to be an input, right? So an increase in the cost of leather was going to decrease our supply. A decrease in the cost of leather is going to increase our supply. All right. And then for shovels, hopefully, again, maybe during COVID, we needed, people wanted to plant more gardens. So it increased our demand for shovels. Um, Maybe in the case for a decrease in demand for shovels, people were able to buy more excavators, or excavators became cheaper. So we decrease our demand for shovels. I don't know. It could be either or. And then, like we said, with the inputs for shovels, same with footballs. You say an increase in the price of metal to decrease our supply, decrease in the price of metal to increase our supply. So hopefully you're getting the hang of those as we're going on. Now, just a couple of things here. Um, of what prices do, and we've got to kind of be able to we've got to kind of be able to understand that this is prices fluctuating, okay, and changing. So we know that prices are going to give us some type of information, especially if we can track and see if prices are going up or prices are going down. We can see what is happening in a market, right? Is that product becoming more valuable, less valuable, more scarce, less scarce? Number two is that prices create incentives to produce stuff, right? Expensive stuff, nice stuff, stuff that we want is, well, like we said, expensive, right? And to be able to afford those things, I have to produce something. Okay, so it makes me want to, have to, in some cases, make money. Okay, that's a kind of a true capitalist. That's one of the driving forces, driving arguments of capitalism, right? Is that if I'm able to earn money, if I do something well, it's that incentive that I'm going to make more money to do that. We already mentioned the changing conditions. It's similar to number one. Okay, when we have shortages of things, prices tend to go up. Um, there was an example of that with romaine lettuce back about, I don't know, it was in 2020 at the beginning of the year, and the lettuce had like E. coli and romaine lettuce, and for a week there wasn't any romaine lettuce at the grocery store. Well, the next week romaine lettuce was there, but there was only a little bit, and they raised the price super high, like by 500%. I think it was like $5 for a head of romaine lettuce. Usually it's $1.99. And so changing those prices allows us to, adjust to those situations. And then at the end of the day, a fancy way of saying that, prices are kind of fair is it's going to allocate scarce resources efficiently, meaning that, we're not going to run out of things. At the beginning of COVID, everybody went and ran and tried to buy as much toilet paper as possible. Now, if supermarkets played the role of super greedy capitalists, right, they should have raised the prices of that toilet paper. When they didn't raise the prices of that toilet paper, right, it created a shortage because people had this idea that they were going to run out of that type of stuff, and so changing prices. So that was a case where things did not work efficiently because the prices didn't change when they needed to. Okay. Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, the government's going to implement some price controls. They're not super common, okay, and especially in the area that I live in, they're not super common. But there are some times when the government tries to make the economy more efficient. Maybe I could say more fair, depending on how you wanted to view it. And there's two price controls, right? You've got, well, we can either make the price too high, we can either make the price too low. And so we've got maximum prices. These are price ceilings, right? And then we've got price floors, and those are minimum prices. Okay, so we're going to draw these on a graph. The best example of a price ceiling is rent control in New York City. The best example of a price floor is minimum wage. We're going to draw these on here. Now, first of all, as we kind of get started, just for the sake of some visuals here, I'm going to label things as 500 in this case. So 6, 7, 8, 900. Okay, so we'll talk about why we're doing these numbers here in a second. All right, 400. The best example of a price ceiling is in New York City. And New York City obviously has an extremely large population. And that population, right, that high population causes people to really want and be willing to pay a very high amount for housing. It's very expensive to live there. So the challenge is that as people become richer and richer in New York, the poor kind of stay poor. And it creates a situation where, the rich people have the ability to kind of buy more, I guess you could say, apartments than they might need. They have better access to it. Um, so the government came up with the idea to set a maximum price on their rent. So that maximum price, so if this equilibrium price is supposed to be 500, notice, right, if it lines up with my graph, right, let's just say that they set, and these are numbers that are made up, okay, they set a maximum price here at, let's say, 300. Okay, so now landlords are not able to charge as much money as people would be willing to pay, or some people would be willing to pay. Well, that creates a situation where now more people can afford stuff, right? Our quantity demanded is about 600 here. However, landlords, on the flip side, as nice as it sounds to be able to take care of people, well, remember, I get motivated, incentivized to produce something as that price goes up. So now we have landlords that may not be as excited to, um, give a quality product, driving that price down. And so when that price is driven down, so just like with our shortage graph, okay, we've drawn the same thing. All right. Notice our price ceiling. It plays a trick on our brain, right? Because it's down below. It's down below this equilibrium price. But at the end of the day, all right, we get the same result as our shortage of goods. We have our quantity demanded bigger than our quantity supplied, and we've got a shortage of goods, right? So they just use a fancy term, price ceiling, for a maximum price. In my daily life, and probably your daily life as well, we don't see this too much. Okay, we don't have these policies where I live in Indiana, so you may obviously not be very familiar with it. The next one you might be significantly more familiar with, and this has to do with minimum wage. Okay, minimum wage is an example of a price floor. So this is the minimum amount we can pay people. Now, the current minimum wage is $7.50 where I live. Okay, we're just going to call it $10. All right, say that that's equilibrium. We're going to say $15 up here. We're going to say $20 here, and then we've got a quantity of people that want to go to work, whatever that number be. Okay, so 200, 100. Now, everybody's making a decision on what job to do based on, again, think about it, we're the supply of labor, right? And so as I get offered to make more money doing a different job, I'm going to be more willing and able to do it, right? We could do that with any job. So for example, you may, right, have no desire to work at a fast food restaurant. I know that I would not. But if they offered me $35 an hour, then maybe I would be willing to do that. Now, the challenge with the minimum wage, and again, these are made up numbers as I have on here, right, is that if we set the minimum wage to a point that's above equilibrium, okay, so this is a minimum price. If we set this minimum wage too high, well, as much as people will be making more money, right? Businesses are not able to hire nearly as many people. Remember, businesses have to set their prices based on, their costs of production. Laborers are part of that cost of production. Well, if I have to pay my workers more money, I can only do one of two things. I can either increase my prices, which again, I've got to have people want to buy my stuff, and price is part of our determining factors, right? Or I can hire fewer workers. And so it creates this situation here that now, if we set this minimum wage too high, which I don't know at what point minimum wage is set too high, our quantity supplied is bigger than our quantity demanded, and we have a surplus. In this case, it would be a surplus of labor. Okay, so that's our minimum price. That's our price floor. This is our price ceiling. They try to trick you, obviously, visually, because we think of floor down below. You have to remember that that's not necessarily the case. All right, go ahead and take a shot at this daily blog here. Again, sometimes when the government creates these price controls, these rules, we have some other things occur. So go ahead and try to define a black market. What do we buy on the black? What is bought on the black market? What's that mean? And the government's also tried to limit demand for products in the form of gasoline rations, most notably back in the 1980s, early 1980s. So anyway, with an answer for those. All right. Hopefully, you're coming up with something like a black market's going to be anything where something is illegally bought. Okay, and that can be caused by a couple of different things. Obviously, there's illegal drugs, right? We have a demand for that, but sometimes even things like, well, and I'll just kind of add another thing that it's illegal to buy. So, like human organs, weapons, exotic animals. Those are all things that are not supposed to be bought, but we know that people are still able to get their hands on them. Sometimes the government sets prices to a point where, and specifically taxes, where people don't want to pay those taxes, right? We see that with like moonshine, where people illegally sell alcohol. It's not so much that they're illegally selling alcohol as much as they're not paying taxes on that income that gets them into probably a little bit more trouble. Okay, so the black market is when anything can be bought, or anything when anything is bought illegally. Okay. Number two, we had a situation where the government was trying to do the right thing and keep demand for gasoline low, right? So we draw a quick supply and demand graph here. And we had a situation in the United States where we had a trade embargo with the Middle East. And at the time, the Middle East was responsible for shipping oil to the United States at a very high level, more so than today. So we get this decrease in supply. Well, we know that the price of gasoline is very influential on other stuff that we can buy. And if you can envision the price of gasoline like tripling, like that would cause us some financial, you know, hardship, especially because we still have to get to work. So when the government decided to limit how much we could buy. What they were trying to do was they were trying to basically get this demand back over to the left also and get this price closer to that equilibrium point. Whether or not it was successful, I mean, I don't know. I guess that would be debatable. The bottom line is they tried to make something as simple as gasoline illegal and limit how much people could buy. Well, what ended up happening was the people that only needed 1 gallon a day or whatever, as an example, well, they would just take that extra gallon and they would go sell it to someone else at a higher price anyway. Okay, and they would make a profit on that. And so when the government tries to, get involved in, what could be a free market, we see a free market attitude by people, whether it's because, again, there's a demand for it illegally, or because if I supply it, then I can figure out a way to make more money that way also. And so, again, not to say that there shouldn't be laws, but it does create some of those situations in a market when the government tries to limit stuff. Okay, a couple definitions. We kind of mentioned them. Rationing has worked in the past during World War II, a little bit of a different time period. Everybody was kind of on the same team during that World War II, and the rationing was generally pretty successful. And we've already defined black markets for you. So, again, for whatever reason those are formed. We know that markets exist even though they're illegal. And again, there's some people that would argue that there should be, the government shouldn't get involved in anything and that things would be more efficient. Obviously, there's challenges of letting everything be legal. And so, anyway, like we kind of said back in the first unit, talking about the government, getting involved in like a command economy and trying to be that referee of figuring out how many rules to have and not have. Well, this is part of it too. Okay, if you got questions, get a hold of me. Keep up with your work, and we'll talk soon.